Hello, everybody. Welcome to History Bite Podcast. Today, I'm joined by frequent guest of the channel, Dr. Robert M. Price. And today, we're going to be talking about something quite strange that occurred in the 4th century CE. And that is that early Christians actually thought, not all of them, but some of them actually thought that Josephus and Hegesippus were the same person. And this involves a work called Pseudo-Hegesippus. So, Dr. Price, I know you know about this, and I want you to tell us for a bit what happened there. What caused that?
Well, actually, I have to confess ignorance as well as imagination, because this tonight is the first I've ever heard that this was an old view. It just occurred to me some years ago that there's a strange similarity between Josephus and the name of the title of a version of Josephus, I guess from the Middle Ages, called the Josephon.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to think, boy, if those names are that similar, that to Hegesippus, I wondered if the uh, he prefix was definite articles such as precedes ancient proper names in some languages,
Hmm.
and if it meant Josephus, because it's in the Josephon, we know it's supposed to be Flavius Josephus. And then I thought, well, it might not just be that the names sound rather familiar, but would that shed some light on that passage about the stoning of James and the brother of Jesus, who was called the Christ, or possibly meaning the anointed one? I tend to follow Richard Carrier's theory about that so called second Jesus passage in Josephus, and to think that it isn't about Jesus and James, the New Testament characters, but rather Jesus or Yeshua and James, Jacob, the sons of Damnius, uh, and who the priestly line, in other words. Well, then both involve kind of a lynching of a holy man and named Josephus and a brother Jesus. I thought, could it be that the supposed second century Christian historian's version of the death of James the Just is the result of someone's interpretation, or I would say misinterpretation, of the actual passage in Josephus,
Hmm.
in which case they're not simply parallel or two separate accounts of the death of James the Just, one by a Jew, one by a Christian, but that the one is a Christian misinterpretation and retelling of the other. In which case, we don't really know what exactly happened to James the Just, etc., or if he exercised a priestly role and got in trouble for that, as Robert Eisenman suggests. So, it seemed to me it's sort of an important thing, though I don't know how much evidence there is for it. Though I guess there's a bit more than I thought based on what you've said about other writers having suggested that.
Well, it appears that they at least implied it. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation to show this. Let me just add it to the stream. Okay, so everybody should be able to see this. Okay, I've been reading material that suggests that 4th century CE translations attributed to Josephus involves Ambrose, Bishop of Milan. But then what happens after that, or at least around the same time, is that manuscripts render Josephus' name Josephus, and other manuscripts rendered that name Hegesippus, which means somebody rendered Josephus' name Hegesippus in the 4th century. So that does suggest an early Christian syncretism between Hegesippus and Josephus, or the view that Hegesippus was in fact Josephus, suggesting that's not simply a modern understanding, but this actually something like this had actually occurred during the 4th century CE.
Wow,
And
that's really something.
And it occurred to me, like, I wonder if this involves Origen and Hegesippus when they talk about the martyrdom of James, because the martyrdom of James causing the Jewish war, or the Jewish war follows the death of James in that sequence. That's that Origen claims Josephus wrote, and Hegesippus says something similar. That's the same argument. The same, Dr. Carey makes a similar argument involving these passages, I meant to say. To suggest that Origen confused Hegesippus with Josephus. And I wonder if something like that is happening here for a different reason, and this it results in, or it reinforces, Hegesippus being confused with Josephus, resulting in them being viewed as literally the same guy in the 4th century CE.
And notice that very little is attributed to this supposed 2nd century Jewish Christian historian. There's his version of the James martyrdom, and it seems to me there's some other item that supposedly goes back to him, but you'd almost think there would be more to it if you had a Jewish Christian historian that far back. But you don't really hear much, which makes me wonder again if what we're reading as quoted from Hegesippus is really a garbled version of Josephus.
So, in other words, it's starting to look like that. Well, from the evidence here, one could make the argument that Hegesippus is really a completely fabricated character, a replication of Josephus in its entirety. Because of all the,
I
I was
couldn't
saying,
quite understand what you said toward the end there.
okay, no problem. I'll repeat. If all of this is true, then this would suggest that Hegesippus is a completely fabricated character out of Josephus, out of different translations of work done on Josephus.
Yeah, I also think of how William Whiston, who did the first great English translation of Josephus, he thought that the Testimonium Flavianum passage was authentic, but he realized that you couldn't just skip by the statement in it. Accordingly, he was the Christ. And naturally, one of the reasons for thinking this is a Christian interpolation is that Josephus, as a non-Christian Jew, would certainly not have thought that. So could someone on the basis of that statement have decided, well, I guess Josephus was a Christian, and then that's how it gets into the so-called Hegesippus in a kind of a paraphrased manner, maybe a memory quote or something. But that puts the whole debate about the Testimonium Flavianum in a different light.
Yeah, that certainly makes things a bit interesting. No, this is not a premiere. This is a live stream, and no, I did not do this a couple of days ago. Somebody got confused there. But yeah, this is quite strange. It really is strange. And if Hegesippus really is a complete fabrication out of Josephus, it makes you wonder how many times this has happened. makes you go back and look at Ignatius, because this reminds me of the Ignatius Peregrinus scenario.
Uh-huh.
I was like, there's arguments that, as you know, that Ignatius wrote nothing, and this is really Peregrinus or something to do with Lucius of Samosata. And if those are both examples of something like this happening, a church father his whole existence being fabricated out of another person's, out of the historical reality of another person,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just fascinating to me.
And in a way, if this is what happened with the testimonium passage, it then kind of reminds me of the theory that I believe Hans Joachim Scheps was the first to propose, and that Robert Eisenman seconded, namely that the stoning of James really is rewritten from, I'm sorry, that the stoning of Stephen in the book of Acts is a rewrite of some version of the martyrdom of James. So it's like you may have a kind of a chain of rewrites changing the identities of the proto martyr, as they call them. Do you remember what supposedly happened to Joseph of Arimathea ultimately? I guess it would be in the Grail cycle or something, but I'm drawing a blank on it. I wonder if he was supposed to have been martyred, because again, there's the fascinating theory that Joseph of Arimathea is supposed to be Josephus, and possibly even the father of Jesus. According to one theory, it's so fascinating with very little evidence one way or the other, but what little there is so intriguing.
Right.
Really makes you wonder, is this stuff all coincidence or not?
Yeah, Josephus taking down 3 men from the cross around 70, and it sounds a little creepy, because it sounds like Jesus being taken down from the cross by the request of Joseph of Arimathea to Pilate. Pilate gives in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, though, I guess if you really look at the fine details of the matter, Joseph of Arimathea does not take down 2 more men, just Jesus. And one could argue, oh, that's actually a sharp difference, or an argument in favor of to argue in favor of saying it's a coincidence, because it doesn't all perfectly line up.
Though I think that kind of vanishes in light of the larger picture there. You have this pious Jew seeking permission from a Roman authority to have to have possibly 3 crucified men taken down, but one way or another, it's only one who survives. In the Gospel of John version, it's Jesus is the only one that comes back, but the other guys are already dead when Joseph makes his request to take charge of the body of Jesus, whereas in Josephus, Josephus tried to save all 3, but it was too late for 2 of them. So they came down from the cross, but just as a sack of potatoes, not a living body anymore. Boy.
Yeah, and other potential examples could be that Judas Iscariot was possibly, because there are arguments for that, completely
You're
fabricated.
fading out. I can't quite hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. There are other arguments that Judas Iscariot was completely fabricated out of Judas the Galilean. And it's so interesting, because it's true that there are examples, there are parallels between Hegesippus and Josephus, parallels of Joseph of Arimathea with Josephus. Then you have Ignatius of Peregrinus, Joseph of Arimathea with Josephus, Judas Iscariot with Judas the Galilean. It's kind of an interesting trend there to see where that's going. And even with Paul the Apostle, with Saul, like the Saul mentioned by Josephus.
Of course, where this path might ultimately lead to our
Mm-hmm.
friend Ralph Ellis, I guess it is. These guys are sort of similar. They've got to be the same one. Like, I
Right.
guess his work is sort of a cautionary tale in a way. That you might say that way lies madness, but that doesn't mean there's a verboten sign over the whole inquiry.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Saul being Paul, which is the argument that Professor Eisenman um, argued. I find that argument to hold more water than Paul being Josephus.
I'm sorry, you said I find that argument.
To hold more water
Oh,
than Paul being Josephus.
oh boy, yeah.
Yeah,
That's really problematic, to put it
yeah.
mildly.
I'll never buy the argument that Paul was Josephus. That's just too much, and that's stretching the evidence, like really, really far. So apparently somebody super chatted a question, $6.66. Oh, 666. But I don't know who did because YouTube's is not displaying super chat at all. It's just in the chat revenue tab.
Maybe we're meant to calculate the name from the number. For it is the number of a man.
Okay, well, here's an actual super chat that's showing up. Donnie Springer, thank you for the $10. He's Donnie's okay. He says, just showing support, Judas' narrative to me is a major plot hole in the Gospels. It's not at all clear what form the betrayal took.
Yeah, this man, Donnie, is really brilliant, and he's an engineer and has just incredible scientific knowledge. Yeah, I agree. There's a big problem with. Judas is a plot hole. Why does he have any role at all? Because which one of you guys is Jesus? Aren't they arresting Jesus on the sly precisely because everybody and his brother know who he is, which is why they didn't want to arrest him in public lest there be a riot. So how do they need somebody to point him out? I always like to say it's like saying, hey, which one of you guys is Elvis? Do you really need somebody to narrow it down like that? And so what the heck's he doing there? In fact, in the Gospel of John, it's not really clear from the arrest scene at all that Judas says anything to Jesus, etc. And the theory is that at 1 Corinthians, it says, in the night he was handed over, which could be, but doesn't have to be translated, the night he was betrayed, this, that, and the other thing in the Last Supper. And some ancient reader took that to mean, oh, he was betrayed, and that's how he wound up on the cross. Well, wow, who would have done that? Judas had betrayed the plan of God by crucifying him. So I guess there must be a guy named Mr. Jew, Judas Iscariot. Iscariot meaning the false one, possibly anyway. It's one of 3 or 4 good guesses as to what it means. And so that it was all a kind of a misinterpretation. There's no way to know, but then, once you had to say, okay, there was a betrayer. Then you got to say, why would anybody have done that? Who would have done that? And then Judas pops up to fill in the newly perceived gap in the story.
So I think I found out who donated $6.66. It was Philip. Well, at least he claims to be the one that did it. Philip Stroll. Well, his question is no crucifixion, no resurrection, which originally wasn't.
What was there? Either no crucifixion or no resurrection?
Let me just repeat his question. just the way it was phrased. No crucifixion, no resurrection, which originally there wasn't. That's his question.
Well, according to the old swoon theory or apparent death theory of the 18th century rationalists, and still in fashion by Schleiermacher's time in the early 19th century, you did have a crucifixion, but there wasn't a resurrection because Jesus was still alive when he was taken down from the cross, just like Josephus.
Hold on a second. Hold on. It wasn't Philip. I'd looked at this. I went for the channel monetization in my chat. In my not in the chat. I mean, in my YouTube account. And the $6.66 was by Vaguely Agnostic. Thank you, Vaguely Agnostic. Please, if you have a question, tell me your question in the chat, because it's not showing me that you have a question. But thanks.
Yep. So the question of could you have a resurrection without a crucifixion? Well, if he died some other way and came back, like if his heart stopped on an operating table, but then was resuscitated, which may be the intent of the story of Jairus's daughter and Lazarus and the son of the widow of Nain, since there were many Hellenistic stories in which somebody is thought to be dead and they're on the way to dig in the grave for him when somebody comes along, Apollonius of Tyana or Asclepiades the physician, not Asclepius, but Asclepiades, and so or Jesus, and the idea is not that he's able to reverse the person's death, but that he is astute enough to save the poor guy from premature burial.
Let me just tell you what happened. So Donnie has donated again $5, and he says, on behalf of Philip. Yeah, Philip's super chat wasn't real. It was somebody else. So yeah, I appreciate that, Donnie. I guess that makes up for the mistake earlier. Oh, hello, Melody. Welcome in, everybody. But yeah, continue from what you were saying, Dr. Price.
Well, you could have a crucifixion. Of course, the mainstream of critical scholarship says, oh yeah, there's no question but that Jesus was crucified. Resurrection, on the other hand, they kind of redefine that away, so it's to the point where it becomes non-falsifiable in principle, which means it's a meaningless pseudo assertion. What exactly? I remember at the Jesus seminar, we were kicking around the issue of whether the New Testament ever says that Jesus began to rot. Was he resurrected from that miraculously? And everybody was saying, oh, no, it doesn't say that. And I said, well, I beg to differ. In the book of Acts, what does it say? You will not allow your Holy One to undergo corruption. And that was the state from which he was raised from the dead. So it does bring up the issue, but says no. And of course, that inadvertently feeds into the idea, well, maybe he wasn't dead. Just like some have said on the cross in John, where Jesus is stabbed in the side by the lance and water and blood came out. Well, some people say, well, there you go. He wasn't dead because corpses don't bleed. The circulation just stops. And so I know nothing about medicine. All I know is that Coca-Cola is the cure-all for any disease. But beyond that, I know nothing about it. So I can't really evaluate these, but it's interesting that certain details in it do make you wonder, wait a minute, am I supposed to be reading about a man dying and coming back, or about a man narrowly escaping death? And in fact, in Luke, for instance, when he showed, well, they naturally figure he's dead, but he shows up while they're behind locked doors, and they think it's a ghost. And he's no, look, touch me and see. And no ghost has flesh and bones as I have. Is he saying, no, I'm not back from the dead, which I would be if I were a ghost? But no. The fact that I'm not a specter shows that I'm not dead and never was dead. It kind of reads that way to me, especially since I think John Dominic Crossan at one point said, you notice how they're kind of elusive in the Gospels, the crucifixion narrative. They won't just say he died. They say things like he breathed his last, or he gave up the ghost, or something that, you could just say he died. Are these flowery euphemisms a way of trying to wink to the reader and say, well, he wasn't really dead, and you'll see in the next chapter, as it says in Superstar, you'll escape in the final reel. Is that what they meant? Like, I can't say that I think it's a ridiculous idea. I just think that that's nervous laughter on the part of people that do. I don't know what happened, right? I don't even know if Jesus actually existed, but in terms of what some of these texts imply, I get the impression that some of those gospel writers at some stage believed in the swoon theory.
And that would make a lot of sense to me. I got to tell you something. I recently I did an interview with Professor Marcus Vincent, two of them actually. The first time I was just finding out from him, but he actually dates the Pauline Epistles, at least the ones we have after the Jewish War.
Good
And
man.
I was really surprised by that, because I didn't expect that. I mean, I suspected something, but I wasn't sure. So I was still sort of surprised. And he goes with Marcion priority, as you know, that puts the Gospels after the first century. And the way he argued that in the second interview, especially, because I did a second interview with him and James Valiant, and I cannot wait to release that one. I'm telling you, that video is going to send earthquakes through academia. I'm telling you that right now. It's because Professor Vincent, he's like going full-blown Roman provenance.
Yeah. I think we're seeing initial rumblings of an earthquake here, just like in the past, the recent past, when Old Testament scholars who had first dismissed Thomas L. Thompson as some kind of a crank, after a while began to think, maybe we were too hasty. I think maybe this guy was right about Moses and Abraham, but they never existed. And now that's the mainstream view. And I think with the dating of the Pauline Epistles, with the existence of the historical Jesus, it's pretty obvious that more and more respectable, institutionally affiliated people are beginning to take that seriously. That's not a prediction to say, oh, yeah, and next week everybody will agree with me. I have no idea, but it kind of looks like it might be the beginning of a turning tide.
What I would like to do is, at some point, I'd like to get you and Professor Vincent together.
Yeah,
So,
that would be.
I got him and James Valiant together, so I imagine that it should be easy to get you and him together.
I'd love it.
Oh yeah. Maybe throw in James Valiant in there too, and make it a 4 people like we did with Rabbi Tobias Singer and Dr. Blackhurst.
Yeah, that worked real well. I'm sure this would too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Hey, Liram, welcome in. I missed a couple of super chats. Donnie Springer, $5. Thank you, man. Man, be donating a lot in this stream. He says, on behalf of Lauren, Melody Joy, thank you for the $2.99 super sticker.
I don't even know what that stuff means. I'm such a ignoramus with technology.
It's people are just, they're just donating through they're sending money through the chat, and
Oh.
they can put their questions in if they want to.
Hmm.
But yeah, I was really, with those two Vincent interviews. I think those interviews are definitely a game changer. And on top of that, the way he argued for Marcion priority, because he was noting something in Tertullian. Tertullian was saying the four Gospels are plagiarisms of Marcion.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I remember reading that before, and I had forgotten about that. And I don't know what it is, but the way he put it, the way he phrased it, hit me. I'm like, okay, I think he convinced me on Marcion priority.
I got to read that book. I was just looking for it today, and I found it, so I'm going to read Dr. Vincent's book. That's going to be an adventure, I know.
Yeah. I currently agree with him that there was a Pauline corpus, he argues for a smaller Pauline corpus before Marcion, but he thinks that there are two collections of Paul's letters that were written in the 2nd century. Before he thinks Marcion is responsible for one collection and somebody else is responsible for the other collection. But he also raised the possibility the same person wrote both collections.
Raised the possibility that what?
That the same person wrote both collections, both versions. And I'm wondering which direction that's going to go when he gets his book published on that. But it'll be easier for everybody to understand what he's saying when the interview actually comes out. Okay, so Donnie Springer, $10. Again, man.
He's a very generous fellow. I know from the past.
So his question is, okay, here's an actual question. The early dating never made much sense to me. Why do you think there would be no allusion to the figure of Paul in the Gospels? Paul's Christology looks both early and late. I think that's a good point.
There are in the various epistles attributed to Paul passages that might suggest adoptionism, and in Romans 1:3-4, it says, according to the flesh, he was descended from David, or of the seed of David, but by the Spirit, he was declared Son of God by an act of power, the resurrection from the dead. Would he say that Jesus was declared or designated the Son of God at the resurrection? Well, he's pictured as saying that in Acts 13, but then you in the epistles elsewhere have a couple of possible hints that he was a Docetist. He took on the form of a man. He took on the likeness of sinful flesh. Well, that could mean he was the real thing, but again, the kind of slightly cagey language there, it really seems to me to suggest some sort of Docetism. But then also the absence of Paul from the Gospels. I think we do find, just as Donnie says, allusions to Paul. The one is in Mark, where James and John, I don't know if it's one or both of them, expect Jesus to pat him on the head when they say, Master, you'll be interested to know that we saw some guy working our side of the street because he was using your name to cast out demons. So we told him to cease and desist. And Jesus says, you did what? Look, we got a few enough friends. Somebody is doing miracles in my name. He's on the team. Well, that's got to be a pro-Pauline thing, that he wasn't one of the 12, but let that not count against him. Well, now that is absent from Matthew. Matthew doesn't cut a whole lot out of Mark, but that's snipped out. And what do we find instead? This prediction of the judgment day, when somebody comes up to the pearly gates and says to Jesus, "Hey, long time no see. Remember the good old days when we were casting out demons and doing miracles in your name?" And Jesus looks at the clipboard and said, "I'm sorry, your name's not here. Get out of here, you workers of anomia, lawlessness." Now, who could that be? Well, I guess it could be somebody we don't know, but it's mighty tempting to think that's Paul, especially since at the beginning, beginning of chapter 5, we've got the keynote speech of Jesus. And he says, they take a cue saying, "It's easier for heaven and earth to pass away than for one jot or tittle of the Torah to pass away." Well, that's also in Luke 16, but around it, Matthew has added material. He says, "Now don't go thinking I came to abolish the law and the prophets. No, no, no. I came not to abolish, but to fulfill them. And then it's easier for heaven and earth to pass away than for a jot or tittle of the law to pass. And therefore, anybody that tells people not to keep even the least commandment of the Torah, he's going to be lowest on the totem pole vis-a-vis the kingdom. Whereas anybody that teaches to keep the least commandment, okay, he's way up there. Who could he be talking about? Well, Paul, or maybe even Marcion, because even Paul in the epistles does not say the scriptures are abolished. And if you're talking about the law and the prophets, you're talking about the canon of scripture, not just the commandments. And so that's one reason I think we've got the hand of Polycarp, the ecclesiastical redactor, showing itself. But anyway you cut it, that's in this gospel that lacks the pro-Pauline reference of Mark, and instead has him getting consigned to the flames, basically, and told that he's the worst example, because anybody that says Jesus came to abolish the law, he's out. Who would that be? So it seems to me that Paul is mentioned both positively and negatively, depending on who you read.
We got a super chat from Brett Forsyth. Dr. Price, of the Zonai and their attributes, Nana Sin is the first gate. His element is silver and number is 30 to cross over like Judas's betrayal.
To cross over. I assume these guys are the archons who guard the concentric planetary spheres past which the ascending divine spark must make its way to the pleroma. And later Gnostics said you had to slip by them with the password of their name. And then of course the sources that tell us that, some of them make a big deal out of telling us their names and their specialties and so forth. So I'm assuming that's what he's talking about. And that thing with the 30 pieces of silver, it does sound like they're making a kind of celestial Judas.
Kind of reminds me of the Told Death Yeshua when you brought up the celestial Judas, when Judas Iscariot and Jesus were flying like Superman, attacking each other in the air.
Yeah, and that's also told of Peter and Simon Magus in the Acts of Peter, and even later in the Faustus legend. I forget what form it takes there, but I believe Dr. Faustus flies through the heavens by his magic. So that kept coming back again and again.
We got a super chat from Liran. So Dr. Price, 15 shekels. Okay. Yep. Thank you for the super chat, Leron. So, Dr. Price, what do you think about Ralph Ellis's book? Is there anything you find interesting or even semi-plausible?
Well, it's all very interesting. It's all ingenious. It makes you think, but I have to admit, it seems to me that the conjectures are purely speculative, and they do not seem to be plausible to me. I mean, the truth may be stranger than fiction, but as long as it is, that is, until somebody discovers some hidden evidence that these strange things were true, we have to dismiss them as highly unlikely, and that's where I'm at. But I don't think he's a heretic or something. I'm glad to see when people are able to construe the same old data in new ways. So I'm glad he's writing the stuff. I don't happen to buy it, at least not yet.
Mhm. Yeah, one of the things I've talked about in previous videos with other scholars like Christopher Lawson and Dr. Aaron Adair, both who are harsh critics of Ralph Ellis. And I understand why. And it's like, look at how many men that Jesus Christ is claimed to be the same person by Ralph. You go through the books of Ralph Ellis, you count how many of them he claims are Jesus. It's like 24 people. And Bar Kamza, the Egyptian justice of Tiberius, Jesus son of Saphias, Jesus son of Gamala, Eases, Monobaz II, King Marabar Serapon's unnamed king of the Jews. Just keeps going and going and going. It's like,
in a way, it seems. Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Well, he is. I don't know what the intent is, what he's trying to prove, because I've not yet read the bulk of his work. I've just read one book and started another. But it seems to me that the effect of his work is to answer those who say, look, if Jesus was as much of a big deal as Christianity says he is, why would he not be attested all over the place? And Ralph is saying, good question. Maybe he was, and we just haven't recognized it yet. And that's pretty interesting. And what he's doing is kind of an experiment to see if that might hold true. I don't think the experiment succeeds, in my judgment, whatever that's worth, but he does, and it's fascinating to see him make the case.
Later in Super Chats again, thank you for the 6 shekels. His question is to you, what do you mean by ingenious?
Well, things occur to him that would never have occurred to me, and he's drawing different threads together in a way that is possible, but not probable. And I think the index of their lack of probability is the very fact that no one else ever thought of it before. It's far from obvious that Jesus was the same as these 20 plus other people. It's conceivable, but that doesn't make it probable or plausible. So when you come up with a web of suppositions like that, you could have hit the jackpot, but how can you ever know? Where is any weight to any of it? It seems to me it's a chain of weak links. So if he's right, and a conspiracy has really hidden the truth about Jesus, I'm afraid it remains hidden. We can never know even if Ralph were right, we could never know. If all of that happened and it was suppressed, they did a pretty darn good job of suppressing it to the point where if somebody does dig it up, he's come on now. And it's not that it's stupid, it's not that it's crazy, but it seems to lack plausibility. And the very fact that you have to have somebody connect the dots in a way nobody ever has done before makes it sound pretty iffy, really iffy. he must know that. And he does give what arguments he can. He tries to show that certain names etymologically are synonymous, so that it might be the same person referred to, though, of course, lots of names were common. And
Mhm.
well, this person was in this area the same basic time. Jesus is said to be over here, and there was a different place with the name of where the Bible says Jesus was active. So maybe he was really active in the other place. Maybe, but it's all of these what if things combined, and together, I'm glad to know about it because it is a possibility, but it just seems to me pretty remote.
Liren super chatted again. Thank you very much. 15 shekels. His question, or really his statement, is: it seems like Dan Brown to me. Nothing he says is mandated by the evidence. Totally arbitrary. We will know Cthulhu before any of that.
Yeah, in the Call of Cthulhu,
Cthulhu.
Lovecraft's great seminal
Hmm.
tale, it's all about this guy putting the pieces together, all odd news clippings and reports where the reporter didn't seem to get the big picture, but the researcher does, and he realizes, oh boy, there's a terrible doom on the horizon that's been well hidden, covered tracks, but I'm afraid I've uncovered them. We're going to be in big trouble, and it's very ominous and so on. That's kind of what's going on. These connecting these disparate dots that seem to have nothing to do with one another. But I find the connection to be exceedingly weak. So I agree. I don't. It is much like Brown. Brown in the Da Vinci Code is getting various things wrong, though. He always used to say that, though of course this story is fiction, the background lore about Gnosticism and the bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, oh, that's true. No, it's not. It's based on fabricated hoax material from this neo-royalist French conspiracy group, the Priory of Zion. So it's really a lot of nonsense. As Norman Parent used to say, it seems like Bullgeschichte, and that's the effect is the same, I think, with what Ralph is doing, though I hate to use that impression, but he's not just faking evidence as Brown was doing. He's giving an unconventional reading of genuine historical data in a way that seems arbitrary for me because of the scarcity of the data points and the lack of any demonstrable connection such as he posits. But that's still different. I admit the punchline is rather similar. You could say the same about Barbara Thiering's work, but again, she's not a faker. In fact, she knows so much about relevant calendar lore and so on with the Gnostics and the Essenes and so on. I don't think anybody knows enough to prove she's wrong. But there are some things that I just don't think are demonstrable, or at least they've never been demonstrated to my satisfaction.
We got a super
But
chat from Hell Awaits. $20. Thank you very, very much. Okay, I can't understand some of the things he said at the end of this sentence, so I'm just going to read what I can. Why do most Christians still get circumcised, going against Paul's letters, since their teachings are not Jewish?
I don't. This is a really good question because I don't know where Christian circumcision entered the picture. They seem to, most Christians traded that in for infant baptism. very consciously. They said, all right, infant baptism is the sign of incorporation into the flock of Christ. Catholics, Lutherans, Calvinists, all of them. So they said, what Abraham was told to do, good idea. We, however, are the new Israel. They had the supersessionist doctrine. They had their chance and blew it. It's now passed to us. The kingdom of God is given to a different nation, as Matthew says, and so we do something analogous, but not circumcision. And yet, like you say, circumcision is very, very, very common among Christians. Well, why is that? Well, it helps to realize that circumcision was never exclusively Jewish. Egyptians circumcised. I believe Arabs did not. But there are circumcision rites of different kinds all over the world, like bridegroom circumcision, which does actually appear in Exodus, in the strange passage where Moses and his wife and infant son are on their way to Egypt, and God jumps out of the bushes and tries to kill Moses because he wasn't circumcised. What the heck's going on there? Well, it's pretty clear that, how does his wife save him? She on the spot circumcises baby Gershom and touches the foreskin to Moses' penis and says, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. And then the writer says, he said that because of the circumcision. Okay, that's actually not that mysterious. It marks a transition from puberty rite circumcision to infant initiation circumcision. So we know what's going on there. But other nations did that too. And I think I suspect the link between Christian circumcision is with the ancient world is the broader use of the rite, that they probably are not actually doing it because of the Abraham and God stories. Since he, like Paul says, the guy wasn't even a member of Judaism yet, so I'm assuming it's something like that. But I have to admit, I'm just speculating here. I can be full of baloney.
Mm-hmm. We got another super chat from Liren. 6 shekels. How do you pronounce Kufulu? Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing that, but I heard it's impossible to pronounce correctly. Do you do it nasally?
I kind of sight read it with all the letters, Cthulhu, but people used to ask Lovecraft in letters about this. He said that the name is part of the language of R'lyeh, a sunken continent originally inhabited by pre-human intelligences who didn't have the same vocal apparatus humans do, so that you couldn't accurately pronounce it at all, but that he envisioned the proper pronunciation to be a kind of a cough and a whistle. And then other times, like I can think of 3 different letters. I did an article on this once years ago, where he seems to have given different answers to different correspondents, unless they just didn't remember it right. But he said, look, it's not designed for human vocal apparatus, so it's going to sound pretty weird. And some of the letters are silent, some of them are like barked or coughed. Well, I'm not going to make even more of a fool of myself than I already do by trying to get that straight. I just do it the way I first read it mentally when I was in junior high. I just say Cthulhu, and I think most people do. It's weird to hear somebody who takes the trouble to pronounce it the way Lovecraft wanted. And to me, that's just going too far. I'm not that much of a nerd.
We have a super chat from Yahoda Ben Yisrael, $10. Thank you very much. Has anybody ever explored the idea of James the Just being a Levitical priest?
Yeah, we're told by some ancient patristic source, maybe it's Hegesippus again, I forget. We're told that
Full
James.
circle there.
Hmm?
I said full circle there because they're coming back
Yeah,
to Josephus.
we're told that James was also known as Old Camel Knees because he spent so much time before the altar on his knees interceding for Israel and had calluses because of it. And Eisenman, if I read him right, this is years ago now too, that he says he thinks that, how could James have possibly gotten away with that? And maybe he didn't, right? These traditions may be a lot of fiction, but assuming that was true, how did he get away with doing that? Why didn't they drag him away? Apparently because he observed the calendar of the Qumran community so that they didn't have the big holidays on the same days, just like today, the Catholics and the Orthodox, and Christmas and Easter are a week apart and so on. So if you went in there, supposedly going into the Holy of Holies or as near to it as you could get on your Day of Atonement, well, there wouldn't be a traffic jam. You wouldn't be rubbing elbows with the official high priest. He'd be there, the next week or whenever they did it. But that somehow somebody finally caught him and nabbed him and said, "Look at this. So what do you think you're doing, buddy? It's blasphemy to usurp the duties of the high priest." And maybe that's why they martyred him. Just all possibilities, all just educated guesswork, but that would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, he was considered a priest, apparently. In fact, some early church writers says that John, son of Zebedee, was a priest, that he wore the priestly ephod and so on. I don't know what the backstory is. Well, maybe it has to do with the fact that in John, he gets Peter into the courtyard of whether it was Annas or Caiaphas, I forget, because he had connections with the priestly household. Maybe that's where that came from, but it's not out of the question.
Liren, thank you for the 6 shekels. Question is, what do you think of Ellis and his Arthur bit?
Not read that yet. If what he's saying, and I gather this isn't the whole scene, but it is pretty obvious that the idea of Arthur with his 12 lieutenants around a common table with the Holy Grail of Jesus, they're reenacting the Last Supper in some manner. So if he's saying something like that, well, yeah, that seems pretty evident. But I don't know. I know you know what he actually says. Could
So
you?
his argument in his book, The Grail Cipher, that's the book where he talks about this. He makes the claim that Jesus was King Arthur, literally King Arthur. He thinks that the Knights Templar found manuscripts written by Justice of Tiberius, who he
You seem to be frozen here. I can't hear you, and you're
You still hear me?
emotional.
Can you still hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Okay.
Okay, there
Not
we
sure
go.
what happened. Yeah, not sure what happened there. But anyway. It looks to me, from what I understand his book, he says that the Knights Templar created Arthurian legend when they found the real story of Jesus at Edessa. And they covered it up and remade the character into King Arthur to avoid being persecuted, which ironically they end up getting persecuted anyway for different reasons. And some of the reasons he bases this on is the parable of the 500-year-old sheep in the text. I think it's supposed to be a parable. I mean, it's obviously impossible. But anyway, Pilate had a pet sheep that was still alive when King Arthur was around in the 5th century, I guess. And I'm like, oh, come on. Pilate's 500-year-old pet sheep. And he looks at that and says, oh, you see, Arthur is actually Jesus. That's not all of his evidence. He has other alleged evidence, like Lancelot fighting Arthur makes it look like Josephus and Jesus son of Saphius and Josephus fighting each other in Galilee or whatever. So Arthur is Jesus from that logic. And something to do with Camelot sounding like Gamala. Jesus, son of Gamala, sounds like Camelot. And I'm like,
whoa.
And I'm just, to me, that's a real stretch. Again, he assumes that he presupposes his conflations are all correct to make these similarities even work. Because you'd have to presuppose Ralph got all of his research right in his books before the Grail cipher for the Grail cipher to be plausible. That's unavoidable.
Yeah, I just can't see that. It's a kind of a
one of the other things he brings up in the book is Lucius Tiberius, that mythical emperor of Rome, governor of Rome, and he was a 5th century Roman ruler, and he was fighting against King Arthur. And when Ralph reads that, I was like, oh, that sounds like Lucius Albinus, the governor of Judea in Josephus. And I'm like, okay, so just so you understand where this is going, that presupposes that his conflation of Jesus Christ with Jesus ben Ananus is correct. Because Jesus ben Ananus was released by Governor Albinus. You see where that's going? So Lucius Tiberius fighting against Arthur sounds like Lucius Albinus. Again, he's presupposing that conflation is correct, including his analysis of the doctrine of Adi, that Governor Albinus wrote to Tiberius about the crucifixion of Jesus. And the chronology is off by like 30 years. Again, all of that has to be true for these parallels to work in the Grail cipher. That's one of the many examples of this.
Yeah, it sounds like what C.S. Lewis says about biblical criticism in an essay in his in the collection. What is it? God in the Dock, one of them anyway, where he says that a lot of these critical reconstructions and theories of Bultmann and others, I won't deny many of them have a certain plausibility about them, but that's all they've got. And when you link them all together, the probability of the whole thing really plummets. You got a chain of weak links. And that seems to me really to be the case here. You like you say, you've got to accept the whole thing. It's like all or nothing. And no one of the things is really all that weighty anyhow.
Precisely. Yehuda Ben Yisrael, thank you for the $10 again. Love the show, Jacob. You came a long way over the years. And love to see Mr. Price go in. Thank you.
Go in.
Yeah, you see the super chat? It should show up on your screen because when I display it.
Love to see Doc. Oh, I guess he means he loves to see me participating in the show, probably.
Yeah, he loves your discussion.
Sure appreciate that.
Absolutely. I do too. Liren, 15 shekels. You've been donating a lot tonight, my friend. He says, also Ellis thinks that George Lucas knows about it and he based Vader off of Josephus, even though it's clearly inspired by Jesus Christ. Let me put it back on the screen so you can read it yourself.
Boy, that is odd. I had the strangest dream that I was playing the part of Jesus in a production of Jesus Christ Superstar. And when I got out on stage, I was wearing a Darth Vader costume, which I have worn decades ago at a costume party. So maybe we're both insane.
Well, Ralph claims that Darth Vader is Josephus. He actually makes an argument in his books about that. In which case, you would have to believe that James the Just is Obi-Wan. I'm sorry, not Obi-Wan. Sorry, Mace Windu. Mace Windu. I meant the reason why that would go along with the assumption is because he thinks Paul actually murdered James. He doesn't seem to think Josephus' account of Ananias murdering James is correct. He actually thinks that Clementine recognitions is correct, that Paul murdered James, and therefore Josephus murdered James. And from that assumption, you can kind of tell he thinks that James is Mace Windu because Paul betraying the cause. The Josephus Paul betraying the cause, going over the Roman side, then murdering James resembles Star Wars Episode 3. When Anakin does the same thing and becomes Darth Vader, he murders Mace Windu to save Palpatine. And I guess that would make Obi-Wan possibly Barnabas because he links Barnabas to Banus in Josephus, which, by the way, I actually think Barnabas is Banus for different reasons. But anyway, he thinks
yeah, I think you're frozen again.
Can you still hear me? Okay, there we go. Yeah, it's been doing that a couple of times a night. Not sure what's going on there. But okay, we're still on, so that's all that matters. But yeah, what do you think of all that?
Well, I know George Lucas was mightily influenced by Joseph Campbell. And so he certainly is using archetypes to build the characters on, and does some clever things with them. He sets you up to think Luke Skywalker is going to free and going to rescue the princess Leia, and they'll live happily ever after, but they don't because they're brother and sister, and she ends up with Han Solo. That's kind of a variation on the theme, but Obi-Wan is just a typical donor figure in myths. Some resource person that comes and gives magical knowledge or a weapon or one thing or another to the hero after his initial defeat, so he can go on and set things straight or win the fair maiden or whatever. And he, in the classic version of it, he may fight a dragon or a wicked sorcerer who, as in the Sleeping Beauty cartoon, can wind up being the same thing. And that's what Darth Vader is. The name is supposed to stand for Dark Father. And it turns out he's Luke's father. A lot of good stuff in there, though I personally think it really slides off the precipice in the middle of the second movie and all the rest of them. But I like the first movie and a half of the Star Wars series.
Yeah, it looks like my internet connection was going in and out, so I got it on a hotspot. I was able to rejoin the stream. Yeah, so that it's interesting because if I was doing this on Zoom, I think I would have been completely screwed. Because that setup was a little bit more tricky than StreamYard. So that's another pro for StreamYard there. But yeah, it's baffling to me that there's someone that actually exists that makes that argument that Darth Vader is Josephus. I was just like, come on, like, how can you logically believe that Darth Vader, Josephus, and Lancelot and Paul are the same guy?
Well, that's why I'm asking, does this person think that George Lucas intended that, or is modeling the characters after biblical characters? Because I mean, that's not
I
out of the
think he
question,
thinks
I
that.
guess.
Yeah, I think he thinks that George Lucas might be in on the cover up about a Death Star or whatever, something like that. I don't. I'm not quite. I will admit I'm not fully sure on that, but it does look like that. You would have to argue something like that for the to
Maybe the boldest thing in the Star Wars mythology is how Anakin Skywalker is tempted by the Emperor, who's like Satan, to go to the dark side, and he does. And so the one born to balance the Force, the Christ figure, becomes he becomes the Antichrist, Darth Vader, and then by the end of it is redeemed. So this genocidal child killer, that's as low as you can sink. He nonetheless is redeemed and restored, though it's his son who takes on the mantle of the cosmic Christ at the end. I've always thought that was pretty profound stuff. But a lot of it, like Ewoks, for instance, have kind of ruined the thing for me.
Liren, 6 shekels. Thanks again. He says, I identified Jesus and Josephus with Paul Atreides.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. Muad'Dib.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't seen the new Dune yet. I'm such a fan of the
I've
David
seen
Lynch version.
I've seen it.
What'd you think?
I thought it was really good.
Oh.
Yeah, I thought it was really good.
Yeah, there's another Messiah. Paul Atreides, the hand of
There is
God.
there is something that has creeped me out for a while, and we could probably do another whole episode on Dune allegory. But anyway, the Muad'Dib sounds a lot like this. Literally sounds a lot like the Sumerian god Muad'Dib.
What? I'm sorry. What sounds like what?
Muad'Dib sounds like the Sumerian god Muad'Dib.
Oh.
There's actually a Sumerian god called that.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh.
Since Muad'Dib is more like a linguistically Arabic in origin, I tend not to assume that Muad'Dib is the origin. I'm not claiming that. I'm just saying it's a creepy parallel. But I don't. There's probably nothing there.
Wow, you never know. There are
yeah,
like Lucas was influenced by Edgar Rice Burroughs, because the Jedi reflect the Jedaks, the commanders in the Barzumian army and things like that, and he gave some nods to these great science fiction things, space operas of the old days. My poor back is beginning to protest. I should probably get going pretty soon. I think they froze you out again.
Can you still hear me, Dr. Price?
Yeah, now I can, yes.
Okay. But yeah, that is interesting for sure.
Well, unless there are more super duper chats, I should probably get going. I'm a little bit beat.
Yeah. Hey guys, I gotta tell you something before we go for tonight. We have, there is another live stream coming on tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Time with James Valiant and Joseph Atwill. You guys don't want to miss it. Be there. It's already scheduled on the channel. Great. Oh, we have one. We just have that. We just have to have that last super chat, Dr. Price.
Sure.
Liren, 15 shekels. Thank you, my friend. He says the Jedi were originally called Bene Jedi. Jedi film means period piece in Japanese.
Huh.
Lucas stole it from that.
Well, and of course, it sounds like the Bene Gesserit from Dune also in that case.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I love that stuff. I'm glad to know that.
Well, I thank everybody for the super chats. We're going to go ahead and close now. Dr. Price, thank you for joining me once again. We're definitely going to be doing a lot more shows down the line. And I have a lot of other Dr. Price episodes I have pre-recorded. I'm going to be releasing as well. Including one of his, and one of them is reviewing the documentary Caesar's Messiah, discussing the Da Vinci fraud. That was a great episode. They both were. All right, I'm gonna play. Oh, were you gonna say something, Price?
Yeah, on the 29th of this month, I don't know what time yet, I'll be doing a debate on the resurrection with my pal William Albright, a Roman Catholic apologist. So that's going to be fun. I'll let you know when I know details. And I'm also, well, I have recorded an 8-half-hour session course on the resurrection that will be up and available very shortly before Easter. And Derek Lambert and Neil,
Neil
Gnostic informant.
Yeah.
They were doing all the technical wizardry, so it looks real good. I've seen the first.
So who's hosting that debate you were talking about?
I don't know yet. I'm not even sure if my friend said, but probably a Catholic school or organization.
All right. Thank you all for joining. I'll see you all tomorrow.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Hello viewers, thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during a live stream. Thank you.